Welcome to another episode of the Constructive Conversations by Resibuild. I'm Nick Haughton, and today, on behalf of the Institute of Construction Management, I'm interviewing Jon Vanstone from the Health and Safety Executive. Welcome, Jon.
Thank you. Nice to see you here.
It's glad to have you here and be talking about competency in particular over the next few minutes. But firstly, if you could perhaps introduce yourself, a bit about your background and a bit about who and what you're involved in.
Yep. Jon Vanstone, obviously Chair of the Industry Competence Committee for the Building Safety Regulator. Before that, I was Chair of the Interim Committee, which was for 2 years. I'm a former member of the Building Regulations Advisory Committee, and I've probably been involved in industry competence certification for about 20 plus years.
So you chair the ICC. For those who aren't aware of what the ICC is, what is its role and how does that relate to the BSR?
Yep. The ICC is a statutory committee. The regulator has three, which is the Industry Competence Committee, the Building Advisory Committee, and the Residence Panel. All three of these committees were set up under the Building Safety Act, and its role is to advise industry and the regulator on matters of competence.
So what's the relationship and how does that work with industry at large?
Well, the committee is actually made up of about 15 members who are chosen due to their skills, knowledge and experience. They are sat there as independents, so they're not representative bodies, it's their own experience. And that's combined in with government officials, the building safety regulator. Now, our relationship to industry is then through our working groups. So under the ICC, we have the Industry Competence Steering Group, which is how we communicate into industry on frameworks. So they work on all the different aspects of the built environment. But we also then go to shows, we will promote guidance, we will give advice both to industry itself, but also to the regulator. So we sit slightly independent.
So what is the nature of the working groups and the kind of key sort of themes which are being looked at?
At the moment, we're focused very much on awareness, on competence pathways, and setting expectations. So what as the ICC, what do we expect industry to achieve? Where do we expect it to go? How do we expect it to change? We also have a considerable focus on building control because there is a new building control regime, and how will that embed and what is the future?
So we've obviously got some key dates which have passed back in April, another one fairly recently, another one coming up in September. So what is the state of readiness when it comes to competency of duty holders, supply chain, the others involved in this process?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that it's varied. So if you take the tier ones of industry, there's a lot of information has been, I suppose, garnered from there. There's been a lot of interaction with that level of industry. We've had obviously a considerable focus on building control and the duty holders. So, and through that we've had BSI create PAS documents, so 8670 and the series 1, 2 and 3. And I think there's been a fair focus and understanding of what we're asking. Now, the practical application of that may be a bit behind. I think it's fair to say that there's still a fair bit of work to do. But as you go through the tiers of industry, I think the knowledge of what is required, how we move forward, probably the further away you get from the tier ones, it becomes harder because the role that the ICC plays is the whole of the built environment. So we're talking about 3.2 million people. We're talking about everything from the HRBs through to small domestic properties. And so communicating at that level, you still will go to conferences and trade shows and say, I'm here on behalf of the ICC. And they say, and what is that?
Yeah.
And I think that's a fair thing. And I think it's working with groups such as the ICM and such bodies that we can promote out information that is actually useful.
So in terms of useful messaging, then what do you believe is the ICC's key message at this point to the industry? and how is the industry responding to that message?
Well, obviously from an original perspective, it was about the key message that Dame Judith spoke about, which was that residents feel safe and are safe in their homes. So that's central to it. As the ICC, I think it's fair to say industry cannot do it in isolation.
Yeah.
So we are very keen that people get together, work together in areas of shared interests, and to make sure that where we get to, the standards, the frameworks, our expectations actually are across the board. They're not from any one particular group, but then connecting the different areas of industry. So industry is very good at working in isolation. Designers don't talk to architects, don't talk to installers. And so we have a real fundamental role there in making sure that happens, and that different areas of industry understand each other and know that when they work together, this is the expectation that each group. So then we're getting into organizational capability, management competence style.
So if you're breaking that down into kind of 3 keywords or a takeaway for people, where's the shift and focus currently on that?
On competence or on compliance? Because they're 2 different things. I would always say on the compliance stuff, when looking at something, you identify what the building regulations compliance piece is. You clarify what standards you're working to, what information you're collecting, but you then justify why you have done it the way that you have done it and your approach. So, but on competence, what we are expecting similar aspects, but we are also making sure that it is a collaborative process. It does put residents at the heart of it. So we would, just because you say that this building is the way it is and we are competent at what we've done, how do you know that? And how have you communicated that? And how have you taken in the different stakeholders? Too often in construction, we've worked in isolation. We work with the people that we like and the people that understand us. And particularly when you get to a resident level, and in, say, small domestic properties consumers, our relationship and our trust level is really poor. And we need to desperately improve that.
So would you advise the sort of starting point for product manufacturers and so on is really considering what you've just talked about there, is kind of how do you create a safe environment for the end user? Is that should that be the starting point, or should we be going first to the kind of regulations and standards, do you think?
Well, it's the whole process, isn't it? So it's from design all the way through to handover through the life cycle of the building. We were very good at looking after the area that we understand. And so when we're considering it, we would say, well, from day one, and it's how do these connect through? If you look at the principal designer roles, it was very clear about the role of the client. But then how does that work with the principal designer's role? How is that design then taken into the principal contractor that then went into handover? And we have the same with the gateway process. And that the 3 different gateway barriers, which are aimed at making sure from original conception all the way to inoccupation. And it is a different way of dealing with it. I know it probably seems logical to some, but industry hasn't worked that way.
Yeah. So in terms of expectations, it's something which is quite a grey area. And certainly in the absence of having all of us having gone through numerous projects which have passed through Gateway 2 and so on, that have been built and finished, which will come in time. But at this point, how do we know what level of information is correct? What are the expectations there? What's your advice on that?
I would work out. Well, I'd go from the basis that we're in a digital world now. So I think that there was a time when there was too much information. Because you were thinking of people, and you're thinking, well, someone has to review this. If you look at the digital systems that are coming out, particularly in complex management and compliance, but also in analysis, having the real detail of why you chose what you chose. So if you think of any building or even a small property, it's the building itself, it's the products you put in, the relationship, the products. it's the competence of the people that worked at the different levels. And then you have how you use a building.
Yeah.
And you can have considerable information on all these that my real hope is that we do proper analysis of that. So I would want the data and I would want all aspects of it, because I'd want to then look at patterns. I'd want to look at risk. I'd want to look at how we improve and how we raise standards.
So when you talk about patterns, you're talking about comparisons between different projects and level of information. And
exactly. So, and particularly when you're looking at any incidents, because as part of, say, the Gateway process, we have mandatory occurrence reporting. So what went wrong, or what near misses did you have, and what can we learn from that? And historically, it's you thought, well, that was the problem, that's what we did there, and it's locked, and we don't take that and learn, and then we don't apply it to other projects. And so this whole collaboration piece of, you work on a project that has an issue over there, we'd like, say, other contractors over there to learn what you saw, and then I think collectively we bring up the industry. And with that, you are working with the big collective bodies.
So as part of that learning, then kind of demonstrating that you're aware of what major life safety issues have been in the past and how that should affect the design of products and so on, is that all part of the information which is being looked for now?
That's the level of information will change over time.
Yeah.
As I think it's fair to say what we ask for today and will probably increase with time as we can handle more information, as we learn more, and as we start to say, well, this is an area of risk. It will come down to risk.
Yeah.
When you talk about not only compliance but enforcement, and the accountability, you want to make sure that you are picking on those areas of greatest concern, often due to intent at the moment, who is actually trying to do the right thing and who is really ignoring it. But then you get into the competency side of who actually shouldn't be doing it in the first place, because in fairness, they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. And
so to have any real analysis from a central point, you need the data. Yeah. Because the regulator's been very clear. It is an evidence-based regulator. It's not going to work on hearsay. It's not going to work on feelings. Yeah. It's going to work on what it can actually see and touch. Yeah,
which is obviously the right approach. And we're just touching on a point of that. One of the behaviours which we've sadly seen on there is products where people have got a claim that the BSR won't accept certain things. How do you go about actually fact checking and saying, is there truth behind that, which we need to be very conscious of? Or is there actually some other reason why that comment's been made? For example, is it a commercial? Is it a good commercial message and has some other benefit for a party which has initiated it?
Yeah, so I suppose a fair example from the ICC is we have the Industry Competence Steering Group, which sits underneath us, which has different groups based off design, installers, etc. From the ICC perspective, we want transparency of that group. So any group in there, who chairs it, who sits on that working group, so that we can effectively make sure that we've got the right makeup there. So when someone says what they say, what are the drivers behind that? Just to check, and not that we're saying that we have huge concern there, but we want to know that the information that is then published and then put out actually is fairly representative. Because yes, unfortunately, there's a number of associations in and it's not just in construction, it's throughout the country in different industries that will be biased based off the makeup of their board, but also really how do they make money underneath. And so we're acutely aware that our information today is probably not detailed enough, and we need to understand why people say what they say. Everyone is biased. Everyone has a perspective, but we want to make sure that the views that come out are balanced and realistic and appropriate.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear. So where are we with behaviours? Behaviour was one of the key things flagged up by Dame Hackett. I'm particularly thinking here of that kind of balance of compliance-only approach, sort of more tick box approach versus a new cultural shift. What's your thoughts on this, John?
Well, when Dame Judith obviously wrote her independent report, it was a very central theme. It is something that I think when you talk to industry is well aware of exists. Yeah. It's not like it's something that we as industry said, no, that's not true. It is. We've made commercial decisions. Yeah. And in doing so, we have put people's lives in danger. So from our perspective, we are very keen to have a culture of competence embedded in frameworks. The ICC in its previous incarnation, which is the IICC, did write a paper on this, which we're going to be picking up fairly soon and starting to promote out to industry. All we've ever done with it is talk to other panels and Dame Judith to check that this is what was meant. We now need to make sure that people are taking cultural and organisational behaviours into their frameworks and accepting the simple fact that culture starts with the board. It starts with how the board operates, how it makes decisions, and its behaviours which flow through the organisation. Yeah. So we're not necessarily trying to pin behaviours to, say, the installer themselves, because the installer will be impacted, say, by the products they are given, the time that is allocated to it, who they have to work with. We're going to focus more on the senior level and just say, right, how are you as an organisation dealing with this?
So what's the name of that paper which is coming out, John?
Well, I don't know if the paper will come out as it is. It's currently the culture of competence. As in it was thoughts from the IICC, so which we did a fair amount of work on, but it wasn't the time. It was something for the statutory committee to pick up. We've now been going, I think we've had about 7 meetings so far, so it's time for us to put that in, start working with our channels out to industry and saying, look, we'd like to see more on this. We'd like to understand why you think that your organisation that operates this framework is doing so in a way that is aligned to the what the Act's intent was.
So where would people look out, and when is that likely to come out, do you think?
I couldn't answer that at the moment. As in we're also working on our communication strategy into industry, so how are we doing it? But a lot of what the ICC will say will probably not necessarily come from the ICC. Yeah. So we will work with the industry groups like the ICSG, like with the Construction Leadership Council, with trade bodies and that, to say, look, here is information that you can pick up and use and embed it as part of yours. So I wouldn't necessarily be looking on .gov.uk. Yeah. The BSR does do newsletters. I think there's a regular one, so I think anyone should sign up to that. So it will be come there, but the actual time date, I suppose, in fairness, a lot will depend on what happens on the September the 4th. Yep. The Phase 2 inquiry report might change timelines of some of the work that we're doing, so I couldn't answer it right now.
You mentioned frameworks a few times. Where are we with the frameworks now, John?
In the frameworks overall throughout the industry, well, we are at varying levels. So I think at the moment we're starting to see a proliferation of frameworks in certain areas. Yep. So from our perspective as the ICC, what we want to do is start giving information out on what we believe is a good type of framework. So, and putting some self-assessment information out there. So we would expect to see these certain aspects in any framework you write about how you got to where you got to. I think as regards what is a good framework, there is an expectation on the ICC to also talk about exemplars. I think it's fair to say to date it's the PAS 8670 and the series 1, 2 and 3 we like. Beyond that, we have made no real comment, and I think it's fair to say industry is expecting a little bit more than that, but we're hoping that having some assessment tool will really help. So people can say, well, if I'm doing something on the principal designer, if I've taken in PAS 8671 as a fundamental part of how we've created our framework, I'm likely to be in the right area. If I've ignored it, I probably need to go back and redo it.
Yeah. So we've seen a change of government recently. We also have got new ministers and various other things happening in the throughout the government. How is this going to affect the work which yourselves and the BSR are doing?
Okay. Well, the BSR and the Building Safety Act is part of law. So actually a change in government won't change what we're set out to do. If anything, it will probably increase focus. Any new government will want to make an impact. And I think given the timing of, say, a phase 2 inquiry report, a focus a focus on residents. I think Labour in their early statements have said it's about service to the people. Well, the people are central to the Building Safety Act. It's residents, and it's making sure people are safe and feel safe in their homes. But also there are other statements around net zero, as in home energy, making sure that homes are not only safe, so structurally sound, they're also healthy, they're energy efficient. And I think all this will help drive the work that we're doing for competence, because that's a key component in doing it. So my hopes are pretty high on this.
You mean the competency of needed for getting future homes correct? And
to design, to install them, to manage them, to maintain them. All of this is an element of competence. The products that you put in, how you develop the products, even the sales of what you chose and the specification, all these things are elements of competence. So any focus on these types of areas will only heighten the need.
Yeah. That's an interesting insight, and there's been a number of points here we should have talked about, John, but what would be your key takeaway for the audience?
I think it would be to make sure you're informed and get involved. I think one of and I think a lot of businesses have changed anyway now, but some still sit back and they wait, and I think it's ignorance is never going to be a really viable option when an inspector comes knocking. That I didn't know that. You know, you put it on yourself that you need to be informed of what's going on, what you're accountable for, and the best way to do that is to get involved in the collaborative working groups that are out there, and not only play a role, but make sure you know the direction of travel and try and get out in front. I think it's quite clear from some of the shows that I've been at recently that industry is looking to really change and to help evolve. I think we've got a great opportunity, and I think there's no excuse now, is there? So we know what the Act is, we know what the regulator is, we know how building control has changed. So we do know the ground on which we stand. We know that there's a greater focus on product. We know all the detail that we want to know. We know that competence is key. So I think businesses that don't embrace it are going to find themselves out of step with the expectations.
That's been a really insightful conversation, and I think the key thing really for me on all of this is really coming down to kind of the proving it, and the onus is on the industry. We know that, and we've known that for a while. But addressing those 3 points you picked out earlier, and in particular the justifying why, is a key takeaway from me. So thank you very much.
Well, I was just going to say, I think gone are the days of just saying I've complied to this. You know, as in it won't be what is accepted. It'll be why'd you pick it, for what element, and how have you actually complied with it. And I think that is a change. I know your business looks at it that way, and I think we need a lot of others to do that too. Yeah,
100%. It's a critical part of the moving shift in the industry, isn't it? Well, thank you for joining us for this insightful conversation on competency. Again, thank you, John, for joining us, and thanks for the Institute of Construction Management for bringing it together. That's all from us, and goodbye for now.
Bye-bye.